I'm the author of www.getyourchildintoGAT.com. Welcome to Test Prep 202, the verbal sections, part 1. In this series, I'm going to provide a rather long introduction to the verbal section that probably is going to give you half of what you need to know and certainly what you need to know up front. I'm going to at least mention and touch on why I created Test Prep 201, which was figure matrices, because I think the basics are a stepping stone for the verbal section. Then we're going to dissect the verbal question types, come up with a short-term approach if the test is rapidly approaching. I'll give you a longer-term strategy that you'll want to do anyway on the way to high school. And I'm going to set a 5-minute timer, and when it goes off, wrap up, publish the video, and publish the rest in subsequent videos. Okay, introduction. In the Test Prep 201 figure matrices, I ran through a characterization of the test. I suggest you look at that video to cover these thoroughly if you haven't done so. But I want to add one. Vocabulary is 75% of the test. It's the real driver of cognitive skills. But it is 100% of the verbal section. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, especially when we dig into the test, is going to be vocabulary. Let me add a couple of coaching tips here. When I go into a coaching session with other kids, certainly with my own children, I've learned to have zero expectations. On any question, you don't know if you're going to get a complete blank look or not. No good comes from checking the solutions. That's where learning ends, so that's the last thing you want to do. Do not, under any conditions, expect a correct answer, because if you do, your facial expression is going to show it, and that is going to disincentivize your child. Take way more time than you expect. We dig into the figure matrices, but when it comes to verbal, there's so much more going on, so it's going to take more time. I also want to mention a little bit about how I coach coaches. So every week I get questions from parents, and the question, to summarize, is usually, what book do I buy? When I approach a coaching of the coach session, this is my equation. Who are you? And who is your kid? And what do you need to get to a perfect score? So for example, from age 0 to 3, you've just spent 13,140 quality hours with your child, and that's going to drive what you have to do to close any gaps with the verbal section. Then, of course, there's 1,000 hours after that every single year. What saves me is what I call the jump right in effect. So regardless of where the child's at, you can jump right in with high quality material at the appropriate level. If your child has any gaps, it's going to go a lot slower, but they will catch up quickly. And if your child is ahead of the game, then you can just speed along until it gets really hard. And let me remind everybody, the magic bullet is how you approach this work, not what the actual material or workbook is. Although if you want to get to 99%, the what matters, but not as much as the how. The challenge with verbal test prep, as opposed to some of the other sections on cognitive skills tests, is that I found the question quality is just across the board lower. And part of the problem is there's a limited number of shapes and shape attributes, but frankly, there's an unlimited number of vocabulary out there. I've noticed that if you have a 16 question practice section, I've just reviewed these from my stack over the years, and I've noticed lots of easy questions working up to 1 or 2 that would actually spur cognitive skills growth. So the big problem here is a word has many, many attributes, and we can actually quantify the attributes of a shape much more easily than we can of a single vocabulary word. And therefore, test takers have more latitude in how they present questions and a bigger pool of words to draw from. So a practice test is going to be even less useful for the verbal section than it would be for other sections. Let me just summarize a short-term approach here. So in the course outline, I want to mention why I think figure matrices are so important. So you're basically doing the same thing. You've got to tell the story. It's just much broader with any of the verbal sections than it would be with some of the nonverbal sections. In the same way, with figure matrices, you're moving through shape, size, color, count. With the verbal section, you are taking time to suss out alternatives, attributes, dimensions. There's just many more of those. And then, just like the verbal section, you want to look through the answer set while you're reading the question. That's part of reading the question. And of course, once you look at the solution, learning's going to stop. One of the things that you want to practice as a coach is not caring about wrong answers and encouraging your child to do it again, as opposed to expecting a right answer and showing disapproval when your child gets it wrong. Because if your child's getting it right, then you're working on the wrong material and there's no growth. And I mentioned shape, size, color, count as figure matrices, but it's not just that figure matrices are easier because there's less going on. It's a good way to practice these, to learn these best practices and then turn around and apply them to figure matrices to the verbal section where things are going to get harder. So this is your motivation. I'm going to end this video and we'll pick up the next part, dissecting the verbal questions with the next video. Thank you very much.